Xavier Ashford leaned down. He didn't kiss her right away. Instead, he cupped Aria Delacroix's face, his slightly rough fingertips lightly grazing her soft cheek. Then he tangled his fingers into her hair, massaging her scalp in a slow, deliberate motion. Just enough pressure, just enough restraint. This kind of teasing, slow lingering, was the most torturous. Aria Delacroix had never been handled like this before. Overwhelmed, she let out a soft whimper. Xavier. Not calling me Attorney Ashford anymore? His perfectly sculpted nose brushed against hers, their faces so close their breaths intertwined. Xavier Ashford could kiss her anytime now. Aria Delacroix clutched the fabric of his shirt, her heartbeat racing wildly. She wanted to close her eyes, but Xavier Ashford wouldn't allow it. He gave her hair a gentle tug, his voice husky. Aria Delacroix, keep your eyes open. Watch us kiss. It was the first time he called her by her full name. For some reason, hearing it from his lips sent a shiver down her spine. She obeyed, her lips trembling, inching toward his. Xavier Ashford suddenly tightened his hold on her. The setting, the hospital, the tension, only heightened the chemistry between them. What started as a light kiss quickly deepened, spreading like wildfire. Xavier Ashford found himself losing control. He pulled back slightly and murmured against her lips, Aria Delacroix, are you sure? A flash of clarity cut through Aria Delacroix's daze. Her instincts screamed at her to push him away. But then she remembered. Her past love had been a joke, her so-called purity meaningless. With that thought, Aria Delacroix silenced her doubts and pressed her lips back against his, a flicker of rebellion in her actions. Dizzy with emotions, she felt an odd sense of revenge. But Xavier Ashford ended the kiss. His pride wouldn't let him take advantage of the situation any further. He released her, leaning back slightly, adjusting his disheveled shirt. His gaze swept over her flushed, dazed face, his tone calm but firm. Reality crashed back down on Aria Delacroix. Shame and embarrassment washed over her. Sensing her discomfort, Xavier Ashford didn't push her further. Instead, he pulled out a cigarette, rolling it between his fingers. After a brief silence, he spoke. You must be wondering, knowing what kind of man Talon is, why didn't I stop Cara from marrying him? Aria Delacroix waited for him to continue. Xavier Ashford snapped the cigarette in half, his voice laced with irritation. Half a year ago, Cara slit her wrists to be with Talon. Aria Delacroix froze, stunned. She had never known. Meeting Xavier Ashford's gaze again, she spoke with a slight tremble in her voice. Attorney Ashford, now that I know, I promise I won't do anything to upset Ms. Ashford. Consider it my way of repaying you. Xavier Ashford was speechless. What was supposed to be an explanation she had somehow turned into a promise of compliance. But knowing Xavier Ashford, he wasn't about to clarify further. Instead, he simply gave her a long, unreadable look. How did someone this dense become a teacher? No wonder you got played by a man. With that, he turned and walked away. Aria Delacroix sat in stunned silence. She picked up her phone, intending to transfer a few dollars from her bank account. But the moment she saw her balance, she froze. Not only had Xavier Ashford not taken back the $8,500, but he had also transferred an additional $100,000 to her account. Aria Delacroix stared at the WhatsApp chat with his name on it, unable to describe how she felt. Aside from the complicated situation with Cara Ashford, Xavier Ashford had actually been quite good to her, though his sharp tongue left much to be desired. After hesitating for a moment, she finally sent him a message. Attorney Ashford, thank you. Xavier Ashford had just settled into his car when the message popped up on his screen. Smirking, he quickly typed back. What exactly are you thanking me for? For kissing you. If it's about the $100,000, Ms. Delacroix, and you feel guilty, you can make it up to me by playing 10 rounds of golf. If that's too much, you could always come over and pull an all-nighter with me, reviewing case files. Aria Delacroix stared at the WhatsApp messages, her face burning. She wasn't naive enough to take his words at face value. Who would have thought? Xavier Ashford, the ever-composed, no-nonsense attorney, actually had this kind of teasing streak in him. She was just about to transfer the full $122,500 back to him when another message popped up. Take it. Consider it an apology on behalf of Cara. Aria Delacroix sat there, quietly staring at the message for a long time. She suddenly felt a pang of envy toward Cara Ashford. Talon didn't leave right away. He was right outside when Xavier Ashford pinned Aria Delacroix to the hospital bed and kissed her. He knew better than anyone how soft Aria Delacroix was when she kissed. The sight of her surrendering under another man's touch sent a violent tremor through him, like a taut bowstring on the verge of snapping. And then, she let out a faint, breathless sound that was the last straw. Blood splattered across the white wall. His fist dripped with fresh crimson, but he barely seemed to register the pain. His face was eerily calm, yet his eyes burned with something dark and unreadable. For a fleeting moment he had the impulse to storm in and rip Aria Delacroix away from Xavier Ashford, right under his nose, but he knew the consequences. If he walked through that door, everything he had built, his future, his ambitions, his carefully cultivated ties with the Ashford family, would be ruined in an instant. Talon abruptly turned and left, but he drove aimlessly through the city before pulling into a familiar residential complex, one he hadn't stepped foot in for years. The security guard at the gate still recognized him. "Mr. DuPont, you're back." Talon gave a silent nod and drove in. He entered an old apartment roughly 80 square meters in size. This place held every memory he and Aria Delacroix had shared. Back then, the DuPont family was on the brink of bankruptcy. They had crammed into this tiny apartment, barely getting by. Even the once elegant Mrs. DuPont had to haggle for scraps at the market just to put food on the table. Those days had been suffocating. Aria Delacroix, thinking she was sparing his pride, would often visit and cook for him. She helped financially in discreet ways, never asking for anything in return. He was such a fool. She thought he loved her, but from beginning to end she had merely been a pawn. She never realized the real order of things. Even now, she believed her father's downfall was because of her. But in reality, years ago, Talon had already chosen Archibald Delacroix as his scapegoat. And Aria Delacroix, she had simply been the bait, the means to gain Archibald's trust. A tool he had intended to discard, but in the end he found himself reluctant to let go. What a joke. Even now, after everything he had achieved, where else could he find a woman who had loved him so unconditionally? He wanted to keep her. To have her stay by his side, to cook for him, to comfort him after a long day. Maybe, just maybe, he'd even let her bear his child. Even if replacing Archibald Delacroix would be troublesome, it wasn't impossible. Talon stood on the balcony lighting a cigarette. He smoked 4 or 5 in silence before finally picking up his phone. "Any updates on Archibald Delacroix's case?" "Still being handled by Attorney Sinclair." The secretary confirmed it was. Talon's expression was unreadable as he gave a few quiet instructions. The secretary paled. She had been working for Talon long enough to understand what he was implying. "Mr. DuPont, Miss Delacroix, after all," she hesitated, attempting to plead for Aria. Talon's tone was ice cold. "Do as I said. Make it clean." The secretary fell silent. After a pause she agreed. At that moment, Cara Ashford's name popped up on his phone. He let it ring a few times, reluctant to pick up, but she kept calling over and over. Finally he answered. "Talon, where are you? My hand hurts so much. Can you come put some medicine on it for me? My parents are coming over tomorrow to discuss the wedding. You should have your mother join us." Talon's mind was filled with images of Aria Delacroix, her soft whimpers under Xavier Ashford's kiss. His entire body tensed. Cara's voice buzzed in his ear, pressing him for a response. After hanging up he sat in the dark, smoking another cigarette. Let it be. In 20 years he wouldn't regret this decision. Her son had done. Her priority now was ensuring Aria Delacroix stayed far away from Talon. Out of sight, out of mind. She gestured for Daisy to leave. Daisy stomped her foot in annoyance but eventually huffed and walked away. Once Daisy was gone, Talon's mother turned back to Aria Delacroix, now smiling pleasantly. "Aria Delacroix, under normal circumstances I'd invite you for a coffee so we could sit and have a proper conversation. But today Cara's parents are here to discuss the wedding date, and I simply don't have the time." A chill spread through Aria Delacroix's heart. Back when the DuPont family was struggling she had given them everything she had. Talon's mother used to sing her praises, always calling her the perfect daughter-in-law, swearing that if Talon ever wronged her she would never forgive him. No. That same woman was standing in front of her, acting as if none of it had ever happened. Aria Delacroix let out a soft laugh, though she found even that unnecessary. Sensing her indifference, Talon's mother looked slightly uncomfortable but still pressed on. "You're a bright young woman, Aria Delacroix. I was quite disappointed when you and Talon broke up. But now that he's found happiness, I hope you'll do the same. Don't waste your youth pining over one man." Aria Delacroix felt sick to her stomach. She hadn't planned to respond, but just then she noticed someone standing at the corner of the hallway. With deliberate calm she smiled and said, "Don't worry, Auntie. I wouldn't dream of hanging myself on one tree." Talon's mother beamed. "That's what I like to hear. I'm relieved to know you're thinking that way." She turned to leave, eager to meet Cara Ashford and her family, but as she took a step forward she stopped abruptly, her smile freezing in place. Talon stood nearby, one hand casually tucked into his pocket, his gaze fixed coldly on Aria Delacroix. Mrs. Dupont forced a smile and quickly excused herself. But Talon didn't leave. A chill spread through Aria Delacroix's body. He had lost more than just love. The humiliation of having her past devotion trampled on was far worse. Talon scoffed. "What's wrong? Hurts, doesn't it? But no one asked you to do all that, Aria Delacroix. Your so-called love was just you indulging in your own fantasies." Then his lips curled into a mocking smirk. "Still, I have to say you moved on fast. Trading up, huh?" Aria Delacroix met his gaze and smiled coldly. "Thanks for the insight, Mr. Dupont." His sharp eyes darkened. "So, after everything, Xavier Ashford didn't even help you? Aria Delacroix, a man like him isn't someone you can handle. One day you'll regret this." Aria Delacroix lowered her gaze and chuckled. "Regret what? Talon, tell me, what do I even have left to lose?" She didn't wait for a response. Without another word she turned and walked away. Talon stood there, his expression unreadable. At that moment his phone rang. "Cara Ashford, Talon, where are you? My parents are here and we're all waiting for you." Talon clenched his jaw, then spoke with practiced tenderness. "I'll be right there."